I sat at the end of the table, near the kitchen door, the smell of burned butter clinging to my hair while they laughed. Someone clinked their glass too loud, a brittle sound that matched the crack in mine. Forks hit plates, slow, deliberate, cutting through my place at the edge. He raised his voice just enough to humiliate me, leaning back with a grin. Well, at least she's here now, scrubbing floors instead of files. No one corrected him. They chewed silence. I swallowed it too, watching them avoid my eyes, careful not to mention what I'd done, who I'd saved. The nights I stayed until dawn stitching life back together, while they slept easy. I kept my hands folded, knuckles white, breath even, tasting the metal of my own restraint. Then the door swung open. A stranger paused, scanning the room, eyes narrowing before they landed on me. His face shifted, voice cracking the air. "Doctor?" Every chair stilled. Every mouth fell quiet. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moves something in you, consider subscribing. Light fell in a blurry wash across the dining room wall, warm enough to turn faces waxy, half illuminated, half swallowed by gloom. I sat at the far end of the table, chair nudged close to the kitchen door so every time it swung, cold air spilled over my shoulder. Voices tangled in polite laughter that skirted me, low enough to pretend privacy, loud enough to remind me I wasn't part of it. Glasses clinked in uneven rhythm, one too far away to include me, and I watched the glow slide over others' smiles without pausing on mine. A fork dropped. The scrape was sharp, tiny, like a needle tearing fabric. Someone said my name, high and pleasant, cutting the air before it could settle. I smiled back, small, both of us aware it didn't reach my eyes. Their hand landed on mine for a second, cool, scented faintly of a perfume my mother once wore, but somehow stale now. A quick squeeze, a murmur. "Good you could come." Already facing away before I answered. I swallowed, tasting the varnish of the table, watching their gaze drift like water off glass. Across from me, the light hit his face square on, making his grin gleam. He recited his promotion, the new office, nods collecting around him, like moths to a lamp. Compliments stuck to him easily. Laughter relaxed, throats open. I caught a question meant for the group, my mouth parting, but it floated past before my breath could shape the first syllable. My fingers traced the stem of my glass, pressing harder, feeling the thin edge cut cold against skin. I adjusted in my seat, trying to slip forward but meeting the hard edge of the doorframe. The table stretched long, polished, crowded, but somehow distant. Plates clattered gently. Voices smoothed over gaps. I watched the shine on the silverware, catch the glow of the hanging lamp, saw my own reflection warped and pale. I didn't move, just kept my fingers wrapped tight around the glass until the crack along its side lined up perfectly with my thumb. The laughter drifting in from the next room, already fading into something unspoken. The chair they gave me was turned just enough to catch the edge of the kitchen door when it opened. A slow scrape of wood on tile that sent a line of cold across my back every few minutes. The table stretched far, crowded but leaving this corner in shadows, one candle flickering low so that half the faces vanished into shifting dark. Voices overlapped politely. A spoon clinked against porcelain out of time with the laughter, a beat off that no one noticed. On the wall hung a family photo, gilded frame polished, but I wasn't in it. A space once mine filled now with someone else's grin, pressed close to their shoulders like I'd never belong. "Emerson," he tried, voice catching halfway, like testing if it was still my name. I nodded before remembering he'd already turned back. The question wasn't meant to be answered. A plate slid toward the center, clearing space for a dish someone else made. My small offering edged to the corner, silver tongs resting on it unused. The smell of roast and old cologne mixed. sweet and sour, settling heavy in my throat. A glass was lifted in toast for her. Her work, her patience, her being here for everything. I watched the glow settle on her hair while mine stayed outside the circle of light. They laughed when she corrected someone about the recipe. An old family secret she learned last year, but now owned like birthright. I cleared my throat once, just once, words forming against my teeth before their talk spilled over me, shifting to vacation plans I wasn't part of. I adjusted the napkin on my lap, smoothing it until the crease went flat, the fabric limp in my fingers. The candlelight trembled as they leaned in to listen to him tell the story about the time he helped fix the old fence, a job I remembered doing while they stayed inside, warm, shouting advice through the window. Someone said my name again, quieter, uncertain, then let it drop, sentence drifting. I shifted, tried to catch a glance, but their eyes slid away, settling on the polished silverware, on the steam rising from the fresh platter at the center. I let my hand tighten on the stem of my glass, thumb rubbing along the condensation, water collecting in the groove of my knuckle. The clink of another glass tapping in salute rang farther down the table. No one turned. My chair creaked when I leaned back just enough to feel the draft along my arm, the cold from the window pressing close while I watched a drop of wine run from the rim to the base, slow, leaving a faint red line that didn't quite dry. Light collected in a warm pool at the head of the table where she stood, her dress catching the glow just so, the candles bending to cast her face in perfect calm. Someone lifted a glass first, and the others followed. The chorus of crystal meeting with a precise hush. "To Lillian," they said, clear and sure, the name crisp as the linens. "Lillian, you've really made this place feel like home," another voice added, louder so the compliment didn't get lost. I watched the glow shift, settling on the shape she made in that space. A space that held the eyes of everyone without needing to ask. Their laughter opened wide for her, unforced, rolling over the table in waves. I caught the scrape of a chair leg as someone angled closer, bodies leaning in, necks craning. "You see how thoughtful Lillian is? She planned every detail," someone said. And her name rang again, polished and easy. Forks paused midair to let the words land. Even the candles seemed steadier on her side. My own seat pressed back against the edge of the sideboard, cloth bunched under my hip. "Emerson," they remembered, voice trailing like it might not be worth finishing. I nodded before they could look away. The clapping started in scattered beats, building as more hands joined, the sound firm and whole. Her smile grew softer in that approval. I watched as my mother's fingers, the same that once rested on my shoulder, wrapped gently around Lillian's arm. She pressed their cheeks together for the picture, the flash capturing the clean edge of Lillian's grin, the dim outline of mine a blurred smear in the glass cabinet behind them. My mouth parted once, words catching dry against my tongue. I wet my lips, found nothing to say, closed them again. My hand curled around the base of my glass, but didn't lift. The conversation washed past me, warm with gratitude, names and memories doled out with care, none landing on me long enough to root. I saw the flicker of myself in the hallway mirror, crooked, too far from the center to hold shape. The sound of clapping faded in and out, like a wave losing itself on cold sand. My chair creaked once as I shifted, but no one turned. At the end, as the laughter lingered in low pulses, I watched her silhouette press against the wall in sharp relief, clean and straight, while mine bent behind the table legs, half covered by a hanging coat, soft at the edges until it seemed to vanish. I shifted forward, letting the chair legs drag a soft line on the floor, my fingers rolling the base of the glass just enough to keep it moving. The rim caught a slip of candlelight, trembling. I cleared my throat once, quiet, eyes flicking toward the side of her face, waiting for it to turn. My voice pressed out thin, careful, like laying paper on water. "I remember when we used to." But the words stumbled, my breath caught on the edge. I tried again, softer. There was this one time, and leaned in, elbow brushing the tablecloth, hoping someone would lean back. But the sound cracked open around me. A laugh, loud and close, pushed against my ribs like a door I couldn't hold shut. Glasses raised and collided with a dull ring, liquid slushing. Lillian, you're the best. Lillian, seriously. Names thrown like confetti, bright and easy. She turned into the glow of it, light catching her hair so even the wax of the candles looked steady. My own voice fell flat between the beats of their clapping. I felt the shadow slip over my shoulder as someone leaned across me to join the toast, their sleeve brushing mine without pause. I let my mouth close, the words drying out behind my teeth. My eyes drifted across the table, searching for any space left open, but every chair seemed angled toward her, every laugh pivoted to catch her reply. I set the glass down too carefully, heard the faint tap of it meeting the coaster. My palm stayed splayed on the table for a moment, thumb brushing the woven edge of the napkin, slow strokes that gave me something to watch. The fabric bunched and smoothed under my touch, the sound of it lost under another wave of laughter. I felt my spine ease back against the chair, the front legs lifting for a second before settling. My breath went out slow, quiet enough not to interrupt. I didn't try to speak again. I glanced at the mirror on the opposite wall, caught a thin slice of myself between the frames of other people's reflections, warped where the silver backing had thinned. My fingers closed around the napkin once more, folded the corner over itself without thinking, pressing the line flat. I watched the crease hold for a beat before releasing it, the fabric opening again on its own, slack, as the light shifted and left the edge of the table in cool shadow. They lifted their glasses at once, the sound crisp, folding into an easy laugh that traveled the length of the table without catching on anything. Someone said her name clear and warm. Lillian, really? And it bounced back from another corner. Yes, Lillian is perfect, like they practiced. The candles held steady for her, flame bowing just enough to give her hair that soft edge. Every face turned in like flowers to the sun. I watched the glass tilt to her lips, the glow pressed on her cheek, the applause settling into a hush, just for her words to land. And I wasn't sure if I heard them, or only the quiet they left behind. I tried to follow the line of their gaze, but it broke on reflections, her shape clean in the cabinet glass while mine ran along the frame, warped at the corners. It reminded me of something, or maybe it didn't, like remembering a smell but not the place. I felt the rim of my glass at my mouth, cool but not cold, breath pooling in the hollow, before I lowered it back to the table. My eyes held the space just beside her, not quite meeting hers, not quite looking away, wondering if there was a word that fit between speaking and staying silent. There was a time, though that might be wrong, when the laughter landed closer, softer, or maybe that was someone else's story. I let my fingers press against the folded napkin, crease deepening under my thumb without tearing. I shifted enough for the chair to answer with a dull scrape, not enough to change anything, only enough to know I'd tried. My hand turned the glass a quarter, condensation dragging a line that blurred fast, leaving no edge to trace. I didn't speak, and the sound had moved on without needing me. I watched the light gather at her feet, the shine falling off the table's edge onto the floor, pooling in a pale circle while the corners sank darker. I let my shoulders slip, not so anyone would see, just enough that the seam of my jacket folded. The breath went slower, weight settling lower in the chair. My eyes dropped to the runner along the table, the pattern losing focus, lines running into each other. I didn't leave. I stayed, sitting just outside the glow, letting the shadows stretch behind the legs of the table, my own shape bending there, softer than before. I watched them through the slant of candlelight, faces bending toward one another, forks paused midair, glasses half raised as laughter sifted around the table, warm but slightly out of tune, a shimmer I couldn't quite catch, flickering off the wine in their cups, but not mine. The rim of my glass dull, where it rested against the cloth. My fingers touched the napkin once, smoothing the fold as though it might hold steady if I pressed it flat enough, thumb running along the seam, pausing there like waiting for a name to fall from somewhere. But none came, so I let the corner slip from my hand, settling back against the edge of the plate without sound, the cloth giving way without complaint. I shifted, slow enough that the chair only creaked a hush, my other hand reaching for the coat draped along the seat back, fingers closing around the heavy fabric, pulling it close without lifting it yet, letting it rest in my lap a moment while I looked across the table to the reflections on glassware, catching shapes that weren't mine anymore, that didn't seem to need room for me. No one moved. The talk drifted, the joke landing soft against the backdrop of clinking silver, her name spoken clear once, then again softer, warm and low enough to make the candle bend toward it, the light pooling on the tablecloth where I wasn't, my own chair casting its shadow a little longer on the floor with every breath I took. I pushed the chair back just enough to stand, careful so the legs didn't scrape, felt the weight shift under my feet, one hand on the back to ease it straight again, leaving it aligned with the table, as though I'd never been there, my palm lingering on the wood a half-second longer before sliding away, fabric of the coat brushing my knees. Stepping back one pace, then two, the sound of my shoes on the floor muted, not pulling eyes with it, my hand tightening on the collar of the coat, thumb pressed into the lining, the other brushing along the edge of the door where the paint was worn, pausing there as if testing the hinge for noise but not pushing yet, just holding the space, just holding the space. Beyond me, the laughter held its shape, the notes round and finished, the glasses catching light that danced across the table but stopped at the edge, the wine in my own glass untouched, holding the glow like a pond that hadn't been stirred, the chair I'd left resting square to the table, shadow falling in a clean line beneath it, quiet, waiting for nothing. She stood just left of center, the overhead light catching in her hair, bending around her shoulder as she leaned to adjust the vase, fingers grazing the stem, a quiet turn of petals, laughter folding over itself in the background, with her name dancing on someone's tongue, the clink of silver laid down to watch her work, all of it framed warm in that circle of glow, all of it framed warm in that circle of glow. I held my glass low, fingers resting along the curve, not lifting, watching her bend to straighten a plate, napkin tucked sharp at the edge, the same way I once did or thought I did, though it blurred at the corners now, sound of her voice rising, tone soft, a hush waiting to fill around it, my eyes tracing the slow movement, caught on how her wrist turned the cloth smooth, caught on how her wrist turned the cloth smooth. A thank you rang out, wrong name tumbling from a smile, not mine, not paused to correct, met with another ripple of laugh that settled easy in the air, the flicker of candles favoring her side of the table, while mine cooled, shadows pooling under the rim of the glass where my thumb circled. Slow, not pressing, just moving, just moving. I felt the weight shift in the chair as I eased back, not leaving, just letting the wood catch my spine further away, the legs squeaking a soft breath into the floor, my hand letting the base of the glass rest on the cloth, sliding just enough to feel the drag of woven thread under skin, my eyes lowering to the seam that didn't quite match at the corner. The room hummed, camera flash catching the center where she smiled toward it, the frame tightening to hold them all, my own shoulder seen at the edge in the polished cabinet glass, fading there, bent along the bevel, softer the longer I watched, the light giving up before it found my face, her image still clear even as mine bled out of focus. I let the sound tool and thin, a phrase half-shaped behind my teeth. Used to, but it broke unformed in the space between, my other hand pulling the chair leg back a fraction more, clearing a line that wasn't asked for, the cloth rippling and settling again where I'd pressed it flat. The last glow of the candle, bowing toward the center without touching where I sat. He moved past slow, the the tray balanced in one hand, eyes sweeping the table before landing on me a fraction longer than necessary. Not hurried, not asking, just seeing. The glass he set down in front of me touching the cloth with a quiet click that didn't shatter the talk around it. His head dipping once. No words. Just that measured space. I felt my fingers shift on the stem, adjusting without lifting, watching the reflection of his sleeve catch in the polished silver, pale blur that lingered before turning, his shoulder rolling back as he cleared another plate. The chair next to me nudged inward with his knee, so it sat even. The folded napkin he pressed down with 2 fingers, leaving it smooth. Inside, the voices stayed busy, the sound of my name softening to Shay, in a laugh that didn't hold me, cut off quick with a cough. Another glass raised across the table with the wrong toast, the syllables of someone else's story tacked to mine without pause. The word mamam, landing near my ear, crisp, from behind me, from him. Not warm, but solid enough to stay where it felt enough. I let my eyes rest on the rim of my glass, the liquid inside steady, the glow of the chandelier resting over it like a pond without ripple, thumb pressing just once to the cool, damp line it left on the outside, not wiping it away, breath slow enough to hold between beats, watching the soft line of shadow creep along the table's edge. The air behind me moved, chair legs scraping in small shifts. Nothing dramatic. His foot nudging it flush to the table, the napkin aligned at its corner, the linen holding its fold without needing adjustment from me, his step fading without fanfare, leaving the space as full as it had been before, my own shoulder relaxing by half an inch without knowing it. I didn't look up, the laugh at the end of the table rolling on, voices skipping over me, bouncing toward the chandelier, light flickering warmer where they sat, the edge of it catching my cheek before dropping off, the shine in my glass holding enough to see his shape blur as he turned away, not watching, not waiting, leaving the rim of my glass damp under my thumb where it stayed. He was there, turned half toward the noise of the table, one shoulder closer, the other caught in shadow that split his face, light holding the edge of his cheekbone before fading into a dull gray eyes meeting mine for a breath that trembled, slipping off without resting, the space between us thin enough to feel his voice drift past, without shape. Laughter falling behind him, like something dropped and forgotten. I didn't speak, watched the crease at his cuff fold and shift as he adjusted his stance, the fabric gathering slow at the elbow, the quiet between us thudding once as a spoon hit porcelain further down, a small metallic gasp, swallowed by talk that went on without pause, his mouth moving, words lost in the hum, my breath catching enough to hold without sound. A flick of memory surfaced, not whole, the nod that ended a question before it formed, arms closing across a chest, to keep something in or out, the flicker of a glance that slid away, the chair leg that scraped backward instead of aside, light than too bright off-polished silver, hurling our faces into washed-out silhouettes. Nothing to hold on to, but the blur. My fingers pressed into the edge of the seat, slow, feeling the grain under my nails before letting go. The napkin resting across my lap shifting as I exhaled, eyes dropping from his collar to my own hands, watching a tremor settle into stillness, breath leaving without push. My mouth closing over a word that had no shape to begin with, shoulders lowering the way doors. He didn't move toward me, didn't turn away, the distance enough to see the faint line of stitching on his coat, to hear the hush where my name should have landed, my hand uncurled against the wood, fingers straightening, palm brushing along the chair back as I eased it in, with a sound just louder than breath. My eyes holding the floor between us. The lights stayed warm overhead. the glassware catching soft glow, reflecting lines that went nowhere, the chair I left behind drawn in flush to the table, linen uncreased, a single pool of light falling across the seat where no shadow waited. The color rich and steady, but empty. I stepped in slow, letting the door swing behind me without sound, the light spilling across the floor, in a line that broke on the old rug I picked out years back, the pattern still there but dulled, the edges fraying, where feet had learned to walk new paths over it. The chair at the head of the table angled just so, carved arms gleaming under the overhead light that didn't shift to find me. My eyes caught on the frame leaning on the sideboard, glass clean but dusting at the edges, the photo behind it showing a smile I half recognized. Corners crinkled, but no place left for me in the angle of arms around shoulders. The silverware laid in a line I remembered teaching someone else to polish. The wine glass I once claimed with a small chip at its rim now turned to the inside, catching light without showing flaw, catching light without showing fault. She sat there now, easy, shoulders back, laughing at something that wasn't a joke but made the table tilt toward her. Fingers resting on the arm of the chair like it fit. Head turned so the light touched the smooth plane of her cheek, her name spoken clear in the toast, voices meeting in chorus without a hitch, no one glancing past her to see the space I took up standing there. I didn't move closer, just watched the way the napkin rested against her wrist. The fold I'd once pressed in quiet habit, now smoothed under someone else's thumb, the clink of glasses sounding steady, laughter rolling and warm, my name absent from the noise, the chair back curving into her spine like it had been made for it, my breath drawing once, quiet enough not to catch in the air, my breath drawing once, quiet enough not to... My hand touched the edge of the table, fingers brushing the groove I remembered sanding down, skin pressing once before pulling away, letting the wood stand untouched, my eyes turning just enough to catch the glow on her face, while mine stayed along the wall, shoulder shifting back, as if the room lost shape around me, the line of light bending to catch the curve of her smile, letting the corner where I stood pool in softer dark. I let my hand fall, thumb uncurled, palm empty, the linen falling quiet over the chair back where I'd left it. No sound of my name breaking the moment, the floor cool under my heel as I eased one step back, breath leaving slow, watching the shape of the chair hold, lit clean and warm, unmoved by anything missing in its place. I sat with my back straight, the edge of the chair pressing against my ribs as the voice over the microphone spread wide and slow, each word hanging thick in the room, listing things I remembered shaping with my own hands, the folds I smoothed, the choices I insisted on. But the name was wrong. So clear it rang off glassware, bouncing once before sinking in it. My eyes flicked up, caught the spotlight flooding her face, the white of her teeth in a grin that held, the way her fingers rested calm against the table, steady under the heat of all that light, applause rising in claps that struck in rhythm like a distant hammer on wet stone. The sound dull and final. No hesitation, no break. Everyone moving their palms as one. The words kept coming through the speakers, detail after detail that fit me like a tailored coat turned inside out. But no one flinched at the fit. The toast ended in cheers. The name again, not mine. Not close but certain, called with such weight that no one thought to check the seams. Hands reaching to clink glasses, an affirmation that held no space for correction. That held no space for correction. I let my gaze drift sideways then, caught on the eyes of someone in the front row. Pausing on me, a flicker, pupils widening, as if they'd heard the shift, mouth parting just enough to speak, before it sealed shut. Head tipping forward as hands rose to applaud, fingers flattening on their own thigh, as if to still the tremor, their gaze sliding away into the safety of the crowd out. My fingers pressed the edge of the napkin slow, feeling the folded seam give and then reform. Thumb running the line before letting it fall back onto the cloth without shape. The glass beside it full to the rim. Unbothered. catching a fragment of overhead light that never reached me, my breath settling low, slowing until it felt borrowed, slowing until it felt borrowed. I didn't lift my head again, shoulders easing down until they rested, mouth closed without tension, breath leaving through my nose slow and shallow. The applause still going, washing across the room steady, as rain on old shingles, soaking in without hurry, the spotlight fixed firm on the wrong person, leaving my side of the table in its own quiet dark. I pushed the chair back slow, legs grating soft against the floor, the murmur of glass and low laughter pressing at my shoulders without catching. No voice calling after me, the carpet under my shoes giving just enough for silence to swallow the step, fabric of my coat settling along my arm as I let it hang loose. The hall was long, yellow light pooled in weak circles on polished boards, leaving gaps of dark that felt cooler when I passed, air touching the back of my neck where hair lifted, no rush in my stride, just the weight of footfall placed carefully, shoulders lowering, breath easing from my chest in small, even lines, breath easing from my chest in small, even lines. I turn at the glass door, pause to see in, the party framed in warm glare, everyone leaning into one another, mouths split in easy smiles, heads tossed back, just enough for joy to look effortless, none angled toward the shadow at the edge of the pane. My own face split at the margin, where reflection met glare, part of it caught, part of it lost to the room inside. Fingers brushed the handle, then fell, palms sliding along the cold metal before letting go, eyes lowering to the line where dormant floor, catching a flash of movement behind glass that wasn't mine, the sound of a toast muffled but even, no hesitation in the clink of crystal, my mouth staying closed without tremor, chest settling on an exhale that didn't ask for more, chest settling on an exhale that didn't ask for more. I let the weight shift back, one step clearing me from the doorway, the hem of my coat moving in the draft like it had its own breath, hand dropping to my side empty, thumb running once along the seam before it stopped, shoulders loose, head tilting slightly as if listening to nothing at all. The light inside stayed bright, casting long lines across the boards to my feet, dying there without heat, my own shadow pooling around the heels of my shoes, unmoving, as I let the air in my lungs drain slow, standing still until the last of it left quiet in the space between. I was standing just outside the spill of light, shoulder grazing the doorframe, the hum of conversation behind me even, steady, unbroken. He came over slow, no announcement in his step, the clack of his shoes lost under the sound of glass on glass. He paused near enough that I caught the edge of his sleeve shift, the air moving once between us. "That's what you always did," he said, voice low enough not to interrupt anyone else. "Made sure it was lined up, remember? It wasn't a challenge. It didn't need to be." The words stopped where they landed, settled like dust. My eyes blinked once, the world flattening, sound pressing in tight before dropping out. I didn't answer. Breath halved in my throat, shoulders pulling slightly before falling loose again. He didn't wait, just adjusted his hold on the tray, turned enough that the light caught the edge of his collar, throwing a sliver of brightness my way that slipped along my cheek before fading. I watched the space he'd left fill in with shadow, eyes narrowing fractionally, like they'd lost focus. My fingers tapped once against my leg, stilled, then closed slow, curling fabric into my palm. Air touched the side of my face, faint draft from the cracked window stirring hair at my temple. I shifted my weight without stepping forward, feeling the seam of the floor against my heel. The napkin on the table in front of me was folded in that same careful line, corners squared. My gaze landed on it, but didn't really hold, sliding off to catch the rim of the glass, empty except for the way it caught the dim overhead bulb. A thin line of light rolled across it, bright, then dull. For a breath, something moved at the back of my mind. Not an image exactly, The hush before guests arrived. The light falling just right on polished wood. A voice softer than this one saying it looked perfect. My eyes lifted slow, clearer than they had been. Didn't speak, didn't smile. Just held the space open, the edges of the room sharpening and quiet. The air cooler but easier to draw in. I sat at the edge of the table's glow, fingers resting loose against the stem of the glass. The murmur around me even practiced. The server bent close to set down a fresh folded napkin. Polite, rehearsed. But his eyes darted once to the slip that had fallen from my bag onto the floor. He hesitated only a breath, enough for the silence to crack. He picked it up, carefully, held it between two fingers. Read just enough. Dr. Bagnen? It wasn't loud, not forced. The word landed in the middle of talk and laughter, sank in slow. The conversation hitched. Forks clinked against porcelain before stopping altogether. One laugh cut off too late. A throat cleared somewhere. The air cooled. Every head didn't turn at once, but enough of them did. Eyes found mine. Paused. No one asked. No one called my name. They didn't need to. The slip of paper hovered a second longer in his hand, the letters clear under the downlight. Then he laid it quiet by my plate and stepped back, leaving the sound of his shoes in the hush. I didn't move. My hand stayed on the glass, nails tapping once, then stopping. Shoulders lowered the smallest amount. My chest filled, slow, measured. The room seemed to wait, holding its own breath. The lights that had been warm everywhere else felt cold at my side, except for the line that fell across my face, sharp enough to mark. Their eyes changed, no longer skimming past, no longer glazing over. They tracked slow, cautious, assessing. The smirk on one mouth flattened. Another blinked twice. Someone's hand fell away from their drink. The scrape of a chair leg froze before it found a new place to rest. I didn't drop my gaze. Let it settle, deliberate, unflinching. Watch them seeing me for the first time, not shifting away to give comfort. My fingers loosened around the glass and set it down with care. No clink, just contact. My other hand flattened against the table, claiming space without noise. I exhaled once, steady. The light above caught the angle of my jaw, the edge of my cheekbone, lit just enough to make them look and know they couldn't pretend they hadn't. I didn't nod, didn't smile, but the line of my shoulders didn't move. The glass stayed full. My seat stayed taken, and I didn't offer to leave. I let my fingers slip from the glass first, the stem cool under my touch, then nothing. It stayed there, full, catching light, reflecting the hush that had begun to pool in the corners of the room. Chairs scraped back just enough to make space without looking like they did. A cough choked halfway, and wasn't finished. Someone pretended to check a watch. I stood slow. The hem of my coat fell straight. No tugging, no fixing hair. The napkin sat folded beside my plate, and I reached for it once, not to take, but to square it with the edge of the table, neat. It was small. It was final. A detail no one corrected. Eyes lifted as I moved. Not wide, not bold. Careful, measuring. They watched without asking. Their mouths closed around what they didn't say. Someone started to speak, but their voice fell thin. Even the laughter behind them forgot its place, growing distant. A murmur pressed into the wallpaper. One tried again, softer this time. My name not the way they used to say it, like tasting it first before offering it back. I didn't stop. I didn't turn. If they needed my permission, they wouldn't get it. My hand brushed the back of my chair, the wood polished by too many dinners, too many performances. It rocked slightly before settling. My fingers dropped away. I let them. The room shifted around the space I left, chairs creaking to hide discomfort. The white of the napkin glared under the chandelier, bright as anything I could have said. I crossed the room slow, not glancing at the faces I felt along my back. My steps even, the heel of my shoe pressing the carpet flat before rising again. I could hear the wind outside lift the edge of the curtain at the far window. The glass knocked once in its frame. The light caught me at the threshold, enough to silhouette the line of my jaw, the set of my shoulders. I didn't wait for anyone to finish their thought. My gaze ahead, clear, unhurried. The last sound I made was the napkin settling. When I let it go, I didn't need to tell them anything. The room said enough.